Game begin.
Well, no, so originally, right, before 2003, I'd hit you with my Goblin Lackey, and you'd be like, K. I'd triumphantly reveal Mog Flunkies ready to get in on turn 3.
That's pretty good.
In addition to the Mog Flunkies I cast from my hand.
Your Ball Lightning would come in and be like 1,000 damage.
Yeah. I'm with it. Okay, so turn 1.
Are you recording this?
Wooded Foothills, crack, Goblin Lackey. You're like, oh, sweet. I'm great against this Goblins deck. I will play my, I don't know, Wall of... This is pretty good.
Are you
play.
just so, Lan had Lightning Bolt in his Goblins deck.
Right, but what if you had Fire Blast in addition to Lightning Bolt? And why stop there?
You just don't have Ringleader.
Incinerate. Seal of Fire.
Do you have Pile Driver in this deck?
Pile Driver has got to be the thinnest one, but if
Pile
you play...
Driver is like your Spine Sliver.
But
right?
if you play...
sometimes it does a few damage.
If you play Goblin War Buggy, then Pile Driver gets a lot better, right?
Goblin War Buggy is unplayable. That card was not playable in Limited.
If you were going to put Mog Flunkies in your deck, you better have creatures with haste. Because your opponent is going to kill the non-Mog Flunky card.
Mog Flunkies at its highest, most dominant form, when it was like, it had 50 pounds of chains strapped across its back, carrying a kettlebell in each hand, eating raw Aurochs. Mog Flunky played not only with Ball Lightning, but with Viashino Sandstalker.
Yes.
So that you would have haste every turn if you needed it.
Yeah. Well, there's Baby Viashino too, right? There's the 2-mana Viashino.
That card is basically Goblin War Buggy.
It literally just
the other Goblin.
Basically does the same thing.
With one less toughness.
There's got to be.
This was a good chat.
There's got to be something here. What's it called? Viashino.
No, Cutthroat is the 4 casting cost 1. Viashino Sandstalker is the 3 casting cost 1. I don't know.
Sand Sprinter, Sand Swimmer, Shanktail, Slasher. There's been a lot of Viashinos printed across the years.
Red decks are unplayable anyway.
They really are. Can we say it right now? Red is the new worst color in pre-modern.
I have so much of a story. I have multiple stories. I don't know how you've, but this is they're unplayable, and I have my whole thing. I was like trying to call you this week. I'm like, they're unplayable.
Red decks
you cannot play them.
Red decks are over.
They're over.
Did I hallucinate this? There is no Baby Viashino.
There's a 2/1 Viashino that comes back to your hand for 2 mana. They're definitely.
Oh, here we go. Sand Scout. 2 for 2/1. Sand Scout. Get in there. Yeah, Dune Buggy seems... War Buggy seems better than Sandstalker. I
don't know if you remember.
Sand Scout, but not by much.
We're cutting Incinerate because it costs too much mana.
No. Incinerate is in. We're cutting Siege Gang Commander.
No, I mean, we were cutting Incinerate from the burn deck last year because it was too much mana, and you just want to pay 2 mana tax every turn.
If I have a Mog Flunky in play, I need my Dune Buggy.
So, some of these technologies, you could play, a very low creature burn deck, which is just, 4 Mog Fanatic, 4 Jackal Pup, which you side out, 4 Ball Lightning, 2 Sandstalker, no Grim Lavamancer, and then this is, the optimized version against Oath, right? And then you just side out...
right, the card that nobody's playing anymore.
So, I think that it'll come back. I have so many technology this week. I have so many.
Where do we begin?
All right.
Welcome to Spike Colony. I am here with the leader of the pre-modern Doge Department of New Technology. the pre-modern Daunt.
There are 3 things I want to go over. Imagine I have notes. I mean, I obviously don't have notes, but imagine
you're just using your head. It's just off the noggin.
But I know what they are. Number 1, story. Number 2, another story. Number 3, red is done.
All right.
I was like trying to call Lanny all week. He just wouldn't take my calls. He's like,
I was watching Celebrity Jeopardy.
Red is so completely done. So here's story number 1. This one's kind of short. You'll appreciate it though. It's round 1 of this epic meetup. More like sold out, 32 players like 3 days ahead of time, $15 cover, Tuesday night, Hex Union Square. I look over so I'm on the feature match first round against Brian G. I look over to my left and I see first turn 4 and black bordered Land War Elf in front of SWB with a forest, and on the other side of the table I see a non-basic land tapped and a Skirk Prospector tapped. The thought that goes into my head is, guess you're not winning this meetup, Steve. 4 rounds later, he's 4-0. 24 hours later, he wins the breaker in the TikTok cafeteria over Phil. I mean, he's like a 2000 John Finkel. He's like a 2001 Kai Bude. National champion and world champion. National champion and world champion.
And he's like a 1997 Mike Flores in that he keeps on getting 9th at the big event of the year, the Nationals.
That's a 1999 Mike Flores.
1999 Mike Flores.
Yeah, so he says,
I just want a quick pause here.
Yeah.
If you just top 8'd that Nationals, if you just top 8'd that Nationals, I could almost not just. Actually, the entire population of people who regularly shit on you could not, but you got 9th. You're just like one.
I don't know, man.
One place out of just like that tiny little thing.
I was in 6th place. I won my round. In 6th place in the standings, I won my round, and I got double jumped.
Yeah, Mr. Irrelevanted.
But well, I have a lot of bubble outs.
Yeah,
like in my career, like I have individual top 8 records that were in team events.
Yeah,
but I have a ton of bubble outs.
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately for SWB,
and one in the Pro Tour.
Unfortunately for SWB, he got no scooped. Dead with his opponent dead on board, like a thing that would be excellent to try to find a solution for in the pre-modern community. But until then, play 5 turns and call it.
I used to brag. I used to win like 2 years ago, whatever. I would win about half of the meetups. SWB has won 4 of the last 5 meetups.
Yeah, and it's harder to win a meetup these days.
Yeah, there are tons of people. People play real decks now, right? So I thought I was really good at meetups, right? When I was winning half of them, and he's winning 80%. Like, it's unreal. And with different decks, he's won 2 meetups with joke elves decks that don't have survival.
I mean, maybe they're not jokes.
I mean, actually, it might be right. He like literally just cast Coat of Arms. Like, Phil was ahead. Like, I don't know if you watched the match. Phil was ahead. He cast Coat of Arms. Phil's like, okay, my Terravore is now not looking as.
It's just not big enough,
right? Like Phil's got it. I mean, Phil's draw is sweet. He has he won game 2 with an engineered plague, right? Like, but his Coat of Arms is like, okay, Phil cannot. He had him on a 2-turn clock. He cannot now swing in because the elves will eat the Terravore, and it'll be a bad counterattack. So he holds back, and then he gets biorhythmed off of double Gaia's Cradle. It was, maybe that's how people should build elves. Probably not, but it was convincing. Here's the other story. I'm 2-0. I beat of kind of I don't know if this is a hybrid. It's like the original version of Tide Control was blue-white. Like, it was like land still with Tide. So that's what Brian was on. Second round, I played against blue-white-green Threshold. So I'm 2-0. I'm at the feature. And so, Lanny, I keep this hand. Barbarian Ring, Mountain, Sulfuric Vortex, Incinerate, Lightning Bolt. Now, that's not a great hand offensively, but I walked by Phil in between games, and I saw Thieving Magpie in play. And I'm like, this hand is fantastic.
It's got a lot of answers to Thieving Magpie.
Thieving Magpie theme deck, right? So I'm like, in it, right? And he wins the roll, and he goes, first turn Gerard's Verdicts. And I'm like, oh. that he's like, Gerard's verdicts again, Sylvan Library. And I'm like, oh boy. Right? I'm like, I probably, to be fair to Phil, no way I was winning. He's like literally playing the anti-me deck. 4 Gerard's Verdict, 3 Tempting Wurm in the main deck. And then a ton of red hate, right? So game 2, he just Tempting Worms me on turn 2. I play 4 lands and Sulfuric Vortex. He says, why did you play the Vortex? You're going to take damage first. But I would have had to tap a Barbarian Ring to get into play.
Right, so it's the same.
I would have taken 1 damage, right, instead of the 2 that I take. But now
no, I would like almost always put Sulfuric Vortex in play into Tempting Worm and try to burn out the Tempting Worm, because it's just like, what else are you gonna do?
I mean, game 1, if I top decked a regular burn spell instead of a Ball Lightning, I would have won. Like any burn spell, I would have won. The problem was I played Ball Lightning, but my own Sulfuric Vortex made it so that I didn't gain the 6th life, and I died to a Wayfarer attack. It was like classic, you know. I'm like, oh, do I break this land? If I break the land, I give him a time walk, so I don't break the land. He attacks, gets the time walk back anyway. I'm like, okay, I have the lethal incinerate. I just need to deal 1 point of damage, right? So he's at 4. He could, if he breaks his fetch land, I win, right? But he's not going to break his fetch land, right? So I just draw any burn card or a Mog Fanatic. I win the game. I drew Ball Lightning, and he got me in game 1. So here's the conclusion I came to.
What if instead of Ball Lightning, it was an Earthquake?
Are you now advocating we don't have Ball Lightning, we have Earthquake instead?
I am not advocating.
Might have killed me in that spot. I was very low.
What if it killed both of you at the same time, and then you get to do the best thing ever? You get to go again. I'm gonna mulligan this one.
Game 1 was close despite a first turn Gerard's Verdict, and I thought he was Thieving Magpie theme deck because I had 2 Sulfuric Vortex in play in game 1, which you would have been proud of. But I think Red has jumped the shark. I think Red is done. Phil basically just put Tempting Worm into Terrageddon, and his deck is like a hybrid between the Bottomless Pit deck that doesn't have Bottomless Pit anymore and Terrageddon. So he just has like Gerard. It's like he has white for Terrageddon, so he has Gerard's Verdict and Stupor instead of Stupor and Bottomless Pit or whatever you would have had, or like Stupor and Ravenous Rat. So obviously Gerard's Verdict's a huge upgrade there. But the real huge innovation is just adding Tempting Worm. So I thought about this and I was like, what if you played Oath Peluche? And, you know, I argued forever that Oath Peluche had a bad matchup with Burn. What if you just like, you know, we had this thing like, oh, do you leave in oaths? How many oaths do you leave in? The answer is who cares? Side out your oaths against Red no matter what. Side in for Tempting Worm. I am positive, like all of the garbage that people used to think about, like, I have a Zurin Orb. I'm gonna maybe get this one sideboard. I'm gonna catch you with this. You know, who cares? You just like side in for Tempting Worm. You have Terravores that are medium sized instead of huge, and some Call of the Herds. You have a good Red matchup. Every deck can just play Tempting Worm, I think. Red is done. I am lifetime. I mean, you can still play Red in like the PSS or like one of these like events where you get to rotate decks and like, you know, juke what your opponent's playing. But I don't know if you can play it in open anymore. Like everyone can just play Tempting Worm. And
right. And the people who don't play Tempting Worm are playing Chill Blue Blast. And that's every And then if they don't play Chill Blue Blast, then they just play Cop Warmth. And then
so I in the last 7 days, I went to Connecticut to play in a meetup in Connecticut, and it wasn't having a great day, but really just to cap off my day, I played against the Silver Knight theme deck, and Rich Shea will be happy to learn I lost the actual card Crusade. I would have beaten him even though he had 2 Silver Knights in game 3 and a Soltari Priest, because my Barbarian Rings could have gotten him. But the Crusade made the Silver Knight 3/3.
The Crusade Silver Knight combo really.
So the second Silver Knight he drew was like, I could have beaten the Silver Knight and the Soltari Priest, and I beat him in game 2 with Curse Scroll, and it wasn't even close, right? But man, the combo of Silver Knight Crusade just got me. I think Red is. I'm so sorry, my beloved first love in this format. Like, there's just Tempting Worm is unbeatable. Like I don't like, even if you threaten the Tempting Worm, who cares? Like, that's just a Ball Lightning. That's just a card you had in your deck for one less damage, but now you've devoted a sideboard slot to it, and they're going to come back and hit you with the tempting worm. So those are the two main arcs I wanted to talk about. And then here's the thing: we have a meetup this week. It's probably not going to be 32, but I'm guessing it's going to be 4 rounds plus.
It'll be 4 rounds. Yeah, we can only get 4 rounds done, and we have to do short rounds. Yeah,
got to get out by 10. So.
Yeah, I mean, we're not, like, last call is 10, but yeah, we probably have to do maybe 50 or 45-minute rounds. What rounds are only 50 minutes? We did 45. We can do 45.
You did 40 last time.
Well, I did 40 because we started 15 minutes late, so we can do 45.
So I didn't post my most recent mail day because my most recent mail day was just like 11 naturalizes, 20 black bordered islands, and like 7 flash of insights. So I'm like, this isn't interesting, but like, oh, I have all these staples because I had like very nice expensive decks that had like, you know, Adventures in the Forgotten Realms naturalized in them or whatever. But thank goodness I have enough naturalizes now.
So if we live in a world where red is super gone, how would you adjust? What kind of decks do you like to play now?
The black green. So this is so funny to me because like we used to talk about how black is the worst. Black is clearly the best color. It is the best color in pre-modern. It's just not a mono color, but you could probably play it as a mono color.
Blue is still clearly the best color. Let's not get ahead of ourselves.
Okay, so I apologize. Blue is the best color, but black is the effective best color because of its equity over specifically Dreadnought. Right, so these black decks aren't necessarily the best against Replenish, but Mengu already showed like if you're black and you want to beat Replenish, they can't beat you. Duress Cabal Therapy Gloom, unbeatable by Replenish. Cannot win. Nice 7 mana. Like, even if you get off the 7 mana Replenish, your Parallax Tide doesn't work anymore. Because of
yeah, I mean, you can probably pick off the Gloom with your 3 mana Seal of Cleansing activation after your Replenish. So, like,
you can 5 mana Seal of Cleansing, and then your additional 3 mana activation.
Well, the problem, right, is that all the black decks like just Dark Ritual into stuff, and then so they put the Gloom down on the table triumphantly, and their clock is like a Mishra's Factory. So depending on the situation, the Replenish deck can probably like get it together if they haven't cycled Attunement a bunch and they actually like have resources and they can put lands into play.
The decks that I'm thinking of have Tempting Worm in them. So they Duress Cabal Therapy, you cast Tempting Worm and then cast Bottomless Pit or Gloom. There's no way you're getting out of this with the way that you're describing it. Tempting Worm will kill you far before you can even cast Replenish.
Yeah, but if you Tempting Worm, then I might just be able to put all the white cards into play that I've been holding in my hand.
The whole point of this deck is you don't just randomly Tempting Worm. Like this isn't black-green survival.
All right, so what are
like YOLO Tempting Worm? Like, so you check out what they've got.
So I'm hearing from you that you like Pit Worm more than you like black-green survival now.
I want to try Pit Worm. The reason it's actually a stupid reason because. The reason I like it is the way that you set it up, and Matt M played this in the meetup on Tuesday as well as in the Connecticut meetup we played. Like he just had the 4 Ravenous Rats, 4 Tempting Worm strategy. Like you're just impregnable to beat down. And
I mean if you go Duress Rats or Cabal Therapy Rats, Stupor, Tempting Worm, you can't lose, right? That just beats everything.
Any matchup, right? And the other thing is like. You also, I think they just cut Bottomless Pit. I'm not sure if that's right. I think like maybe you should play Bottomless Pit instead of Stupor or in addition to Stupor after sideboarding. Like I watched a lot of games in both meetups where people had Bottomless Pit in play. The other player can't play. You just have like Tempting Worm and Call of the Herd, and your opponent list has like a survival in play, and like they don't have the resources to actually survival and get a thing in play that's better than a Bird of Paradise because their mana is compromised by this. So like if you have, a sideboarded Phyrexian Furnace or whatever, like they can't do any of their shenanigans. And then they're just dying to the rack. Like that's the other
Well,
thing.
the problem is how fussy it is, right? Because like if you get your pit out, you might just like you might just pit your own tempting worm. So you have to tempting worm first. But if you tempting worm first, then they'll put their permanents into play and get under your pit.
I'm not sure. So obviously I don't know if there is a pit rat cabal, but those guys have switched to stupor worm, right, instead of pit worm. And so maybe they're wiser, like that one Polish Nationals. I'm just saying I was impressed by the card Bottomless Pit. Right. Separately, if you want to beat Dreadnought, Bottomless Pit point removal, any clock is a very good recipe.
Right. But the thing is, like, if you just I agree with you that it's good, right? But the thing is, if you're replacing Pit with Stupor, like, and you know, you have 3 columns, right? Like Stupor doesn't lock your opponent, but because you're much more proactive deck, like proactive Stupor. Yeah, proactive Stupor, like one, it gets you the effect immediately. And it can't be favorably interacted with Disenchant, which is like, it's not nothing, right? So like one of the things that, you know,
or
my deck,
Ray of Revelation is probably a better.
That's exactly what I'm saying. So one of the things that my decks would do is that they always contain 1 Ray of Revelation, and you know that generally lines up pretty well with Pit.
It's weird to me that your burn deck has Ray of Revelation, but sure,
I'd consider it. I don't have a burn deck because I don't play burn anymore. Burn is over.
Because
there's no more burn.
Week, I don't play burn anymore either. Like, what the heck? Like, this is so crazy because, you know, I was the biggest burn advocate. Like, burn has always been a pillar of the format. I think that we're going to look fondly on the past when we're older.
when people played burn
like,
at events.
Oh, do you guys remember when Jackal-Pup was a playable Magic the Gathering?
We're going to be talking about it like it's The Rock. We're going to be
it's worse. The Rock crushes it. Like, all you have to do is build The Rock correctly, and it's just like the second best deck in the format. Now, obviously, if some of the trends continue, then burn will be good again. Because clearly Jackal-Pup is going to be good against this mid-range deck that's got Ravenous Rat, 4 Tempting Worm, and Hand Destruction. It's just going to be great against that. Burn will definitely make a comeback in the format where Mono Blue 12/12 is at least in the top 3 no matter what. I don't know what its path is, Lanny. Like, I think the 2 best decks are like some version of Black-Green, whether it's Survival, whether it's Tempting Worm-based, with discard, and 12/12 and Replenish. And if Replenish wants to beat burn, they can. The Replenish is just like, you know, I'm good against everybody. I guess I'll just play like 8 creatures in my sideboard, and sometimes my Exalted Angel will get there. Like, when I played Replenish at LobsterCon, I played against many burn decks, and none of them could crack my Squee combo. Like, if you want to beat burn, they're not going to beat you, right? Like, that's...
Exalted Angel gets under Gloom. You just legit play Exalted Angel.
Yeah, but these are decks that have a ton of removal that they're not necessarily siding out their creature removal because you have creatures.
I mean, I don't disagree, but you know, your deck would need to contain X Gloom, X Naturalize, you know, and then you're gonna play X Snuff Out, Smother.
The decks right now seem to have like Smother and Vendetta instead of Snuff Out. Yeah. I don't know about Vendetta versus... I think Snuff Out's much better against 12/12. Obviously, Vendetta's better against like...
I mean, they might just not have enough swamps. But all I'm saying is that like the Black-Green deck in this context is like a low resource deck. So if it has the Gloom, that decreases the possibility of it having the Snuff Out. And
they don't draw a lot of cards. That's true.
Yeah, but Sylvan Library has always been superb against Replenish, so you can just play Sylvan Library in your...
I was actually thinking, is this one of the decks where like maybe we play some Miri's Guiles to make our hand better, and then also like 1 Sylvan Library? Like I looked at this and I'm like, you know, these Black-Green decks have always had like 2 Sylvan Library. Maybe this is a place where we should try it out. But you know who the big winner is, Lanny? The big winner is Sam's deck. Because Sam's deck is like the only Enchantress deck that doesn't Raffle Stomp burn, right? It's got a bad burn matchup in game 1. I'm bad, like, you know, not good burn matchup versus most Replenished.
Yeah, I mean, it just needs to put solitary in play like you do.
Yeah, but most Enchantress decks have many routes to crushing burn in game. Right.
Well, they're just a little faster, right? So you have Wild Growth, but you can also play Wild Growth in Sam's deck if you wanted to.
All I'm saying is Sam's deck is going to benefit from burn being worse, and tempting Wurm like Pit, Stupor, stuff like that, is not particularly good against the Enchantress draw engine, right? Like, they can draw out of it. They could probably be in a situation where they're drawing so many cards over the course of a game that doesn't end quickly that they can just get out from under the rack.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, Enchantress has always been a good card against, Black X. I was thinking that if the metagame is like what Terrageddon, Replenish, Dreadnought, and Black Green, then Sam's deck looks pretty good into that. I think that there's some element of I don't know how good Sam's deck is against like Survival of the Fittest style stuff. I was kind of curious if like what I have such a hard time evaluating Survival of the Fittest right now because it's horrible against Replenish. Like every survival deck ever has been bad against Replenish, with basically no exception, because if you run 20 creatures in your deck, no amount of Naturalize saves you from getting Opal Waved, and then Opal Wave picks off your survival too. So
well,
like
elves can win the game on turn 3.
Yeah, that's the best you can hope for, right? Is that you have Natural Mountain, you have Gaia's Cradle, you have Tangle Wire, you have Survival, and you have Priest of Titania is a 5-leg parlay with enough lands to like cast it. And you need Forest and you need Accelerator. So that's a 7-card parlay to get Replenish before, they just have to go intuition Replenish. That's all they have to do.
Okay, well, here's the thing. I'm actually so excited that red is like red has always just been like my pillow I slept on in this format, even when it like Goblins was like one of the best decks. And Goblins has been like an underperformer. We're going to be talking about how red is the worst color.
Yeah.
Before
Goblins was below 50% at LobsterCon. Just like unreal.
It's been an underperformer for a while, and the thing is, it's so weird. I was talking to Jeff Cunningham this week. Jeff Cunningham, the legendary Fedge, Get Bigger, Die Trying, the great tournament report writer of Aeon's Past. And he invented Tempting Wurm for the Yokohama Masters. He played it in the sideboard of his Blue-Green Madness deck way back in 2003. So I hit up Jeff and I'm like, Premodern's finally caught up to a thing that you invented 22 years ago, right? And I remember reading an article and I was just like, this card is terrible. And he was just like, yeah, you can't evaluate this card the way that you would normally evaluate a Magic card, but like, if your opponent's going to play Jackal Pups and Ball Lightnings and Lava Darts, you just put this into play and kill them. And his deck had Wonder. So, because obviously a deck with Waterfront Bouncer is not going to match up very well again. And back then you would play Merfolk Looter, right? In order to get your madness on, it was not going to match up well against a deck with Lava Dart. And it's like, now you play this 5/5 and it's still tight, but you can get there. He did not have the benefit of doing things like survival squeeing into Cayman, right? Like that was that was not available.
That was in the card pool, nor would have anybody found it.
Yeah, like the card pool of this era did not have Survival of the Fittest, and no one would ever occurred to them to cave in a Jackal Pup. That was his solution when so many of his Madness enablers were 1/1s for 2.
What do we think about Grant Paris? I believe that's Kingslayer Online, and his Mono Black Clerics. Cabal Ritual into Priest of Gix, Rotlung Reanimator, go.
Is this similar to the deck that Brian used to come in the finals?
He's got ports instead of wastelands, which I find interesting. The rest seems pretty similar. We've got 4 Duress, 3 Cabal Therapy, 4 Ritual, 2 Unearth. You've got, of course, Dark Supplicant, the Goblin Lackey of the Clerics deck.
Can we pause for a sec. I told you I needed to do something for work.
Yes. It's so interesting that this clerics deck can be a thing. So when I was looking at mono black, I wanted to like look at the zombies deck and see if it could be like a better beatdown deck, which led me to put Maggot Carrier into it. And basically I was just like, I don't think that Rotlung Reanimator beatdown is good. Because it doesn't feel like a beatdown card. And then basically this clerics deck, which plays 1/1s for 1s, 2/2s for 2s. It has 2 headhunters in it, which is the only cleric at 2 that is remotely playable. Rotlung Reanimator, Priest of Gix, and Cabal Archon at 3. So we're like going Ritual, Rotlung Reanimator, turn 2 Headhunter, turn 3. Hopefully line up our Priest of Gix with some good stuff, and then Scion of Darkness. Like, these are not creatures that feel like they do anything on the battlefield. Like, they don't seem like they line up well against Call of the Herd, Wall of Blossoms, Terravor, Phyrexian Dreadnought. I mean, obviously this deck is going to be pretty good against
Grant's
Dreadnought.
mana control?
He has got 4 Rishton Port.
So, obviously this is a different deck. You know, obviously some of these clerics are zombies also. But I lost to Aaron Dix's just zombies, not cleric theme deck in the PSS, and I felt helpless with the control deck because he had, I believe, Wasteland, and you could just like make it so that your opponent doesn't have enough mana to cast a sweeper, and you just manage their ability to interact with you with a little bit of hand destruction, and I mean you're just naming Headhunter, which is like a terrible card, kind of, but if your opponent isn't answering it, it's kind of gorgeous, right? It's like, what if there's a card that's just like, this is too
right, but what if your opponent has anything, like just anything, okay, so right? Like, what if they have?
This is not a good deck if your opponent has something.
Yeah,
it's like it just puts land.
We were talking about having ravenous rats on the battlefield, which you can't snuff out even if you wanted to.
That would help to contain a Headhunter.
Yeah.
I mean, this deck doesn't seem real to me, but this was a deck that was I believe in the winners half of the Connecticut meetup I played in over the weekend. And again, decks like this are going to benefit from red losing popularity.
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't think I'm putting this in air quotes. I don't think it's good. If I'm going to play a typal deck or a tribal deck, whatever the heck you call it these days, I would err on elves first before I went to goblins.
Well, I'm so confused. I'm so confused about like the identity of this deck because it kind of had like, is this a beatdown deck? Is it a mid-range deck? So it's like it plays 23 creatures. It has 7 discard spells. It has 3 removal spells. It has Dark Ritual. It has Rishton Port. Like I just look at this deck. I'm like, what are you trying to do? Like put 2 2/2s in play, port duress your opponent, and that's that. I was like, is that good enough? I was like, has that ever been good? Like, if you describe that deck to me, I was like, okay, here's the ideal start: 1/1/1, or Dark Ritual. Okay, so let's take a Dark Ritual 2/2 or 2 2/2s. I'm just like, okay, I don't know. I'll put Oath of Druids into play. Like, I will Pyroclasm you. Like, I will just play a Wall of Blossoms. All of these things, like, I will eventually have Call of the Herd. All of these things seem to go over this. Turn 2, port you. Turn 3, play another 2/2. It's just like, or you can just go Dark Supplicant, Ritual, Priest of Gix, Rotlung Reanimator, sacrifice. Like, that's the God draw, right? So you go Swamp, Dark Supplement, turn 2, duress you, Ritual, Priest of Gix, Rotlung, sacrifice them. You get 3 2/2s and a Scion of Darkness. But the rest of the time, you're just kind of like overcosted guys, and then you play Cabal Archon, and then you just like drain for 6, and it's just like, okay, I mean, I don't know. How does this win any games of Magic? This is what, like, quick clarification. Online, we play Swiss with cut now. So it's not Swiss, it's just open play. So you play 6 rounds paired against anyone that you can find. And then it's an elimination cut that's top 16. So, this individual has to go 5-1 in open play and then 4-0 elimination. So it's just one, congrats. Obviously, it's awesome. But I could have never built this deck. I would have like had this deck in my, like I would have like looked at it. I would have been moving cards in and out. I'm like, well, there's no way this works. And yet, here we are. And that's the thing is like, I kind of feel, I don't know. I kind of feel like I have like I have less of a grasp about what's going on right now than ever. Like I've never felt so confused about like what can work and what doesn't in the pre-modern format that I've ever felt. And you know, it's I don't know. You know, we've got, of course, Joe Lansdale's Wug Threshold deck making it all the way to the finals of the Super Gauntlet, taking down you know, quite a few decks that we thought that it would beat and quite a few decks that we thought that it wouldn't beat along the way.
I mean, so aggro control is the best archetype, right? So it's historically the best archetype in Magic. Like if you get like a good clock and then you manage the rest of the game with counter spells, then, you know, and there are a lot of decks that can do that, right? Like you can open on a Bitter Blossom, or you can open on a Crystalline Sliver, or you can open on a Nimble Mongoose, or in some cases your Phyrexian Dreadnought is, you know, people think about that as kind of a combo, but it's also just like the really good version of Counter Sliver. So like instead of like a 2-mana 2/2, you have a 2-mana 12/12.
That's because Counterspell is super, super important in these contexts, right? Like Counterspell is super important because your opponent is going to like play certain gigantic scary stuff like Opal Wave combo or Tin Fins combo, or, you know, Survival of the Fittest. I mean,
it's not just Counterspell. It's like you have a thing, and so because you have a thing, you manage how much time you need to have a Counterspell in your hand, right? Like a Landstill player, they need to have that Counterspell has to be in their hand or be replaced by additional Counterspells for like the next 20 turns.
Yeah.
Right? Like a 12/12 player, they need that Counterspell for 2 turns.
I'm just
if they don't have another one, the game's over already.
I'm just making the distinction, right? Because like Duress 2/2 just doesn't sound like a successful strategy. And actually, there's just like a ton of decks that are built around Duress thing. And the thing is just like ideally a tempting Wurm, but sometimes it's just Call the Herd, right? Like sometimes it's just you know, whatever the second best creature is.
So not that I want to get into a debate over who had the less unplayable best attack deck, but like my best attack deck was based around like having a pretty good guy and then just counterspelling, and then if that doesn't work out, I can upheaval the game and start it over again, so that like we're on turn 1 again, but I have a 3/3 Shroud, right? Like that was like
it's very bold to cast upheaval against so many decks that have Mox Diamond now. It's like every Terrageddon deck.
Yeah, but also this was a spice deck, right? So you know that we always have to put that to the side. Some idiot might have kept a Incinerate Lightning Bolt 4-land hand to beat my Thieving Magpie in that context. Okay, so here's my thought. I think it's wonderful that you don't know what's going on. Like I think that we knew more of what was going on than a lot of folks for a long time, and the fact that all this stuff is moving is so incredible, right? Like a month ago, it would have never occurred to me that, you know, a bottomless pit deck would be correctly constructed with maybe 8 2-drop green creatures
and 0 bottomless pits.
And no, but then the same strategy would then cut the bottomless pits, right? Like that didn't occur to me. Now, like after, you know, we should try Ravenous Rats, or like this deck seems incredible to me now, right? Like the way that I look at it.
Right. It feels like it has everything that it needs to be like a tier 1 power level deck, like a deck that conceivably is as powerful, you know, as a deck like Terrageddon, which like I'm a huge Terrageddon doubter. But you know, yeah, like, you know, you've got your Terrageddon, you got your black-green survivals. It's like, this black-green survival deck, which, you know, took months and months of, you know, tuning and tweaking. And then it's just like, you know what? Tempting Worm bottomless pit go. Like Tempting Worm stupor you. Like this is the plan. Like, And it's sweet because Phil's deck, also, comes out of the woodwork in the same way. If you got your, you've got your 1,000 land Weathered Wayfarer deck, and instead of what naturalizes and like whatever, you're just playing a bunch of discard and Tempting Worms. But like that, it solved a really awesome. It double solves some problems for the Terrageddon deck, which is one. The thing that I liked least about Terrageddon is that it's a deck that has no card selection beyond Sylvan Library, and it has to like choose what kind of like answers that it has. So obviously you've got a bunch of Swords of Plowshares, but then you're like also going to have these hands where you have like a lot of Mox Diamond, Naturalize without any interesting targets, Wasteland without any interesting targets.
This is actually the thing that I like about the Bottomless Pit version, is that like if you have cards that are useless, you just test them.
you just
like it's just like, oh, whatever, this goes in the pit. Like, isn't that kind of very liberating? And it's pretty good, right? Like, because you play a sub game when Bottomless Pit's in play, right? People are like desperately trying to hold on to whatever resources they can, and the rack is limiting their ability to do that. But just like, okay, well, the only thing I don't like is like when the pit makes you discard your Tainted Wood or whatever, and now you can't cast any of your green cards that you draw.
Yeah, sure.
That does come up. But I think like, I don't know, man. I think the biggest knock I've heard on the black-green pit or no pit deck is that it's not as powerful as black-green survival, which is probably true. And like it just has different matchups, I think. I think like in game one, wouldn't you much rather be black-green pit against 12-12 than black-green survival?
Yes, of course, because we hate the survival side from there. But like I think it's
versus
interesting.
The pit side's probably pretty good.
Well, yeah. So then it becomes a question. It's just like, okay, well, what kind of format do we live in, or how did these decks like interact and coexist with each other? Like, are we like a big power engine over the top style situation where we're like, okay, here's the plan. We're going to put survival of the fittest in play, and then we're going to rock. We're going to put Phyrexian Dreadnought in play. We're going to rock. We're going to replenish you, and you're dead. Like, so we're going to tin fins you, Icky Pop you, et cetera, et cetera. Or are we just like 1-1-2-2-3-3, like duress 2-2-3-3, duress 5-5? Like, what kind of
the black green deck is just like, I think it's like everything to everyone. It's like the fun police, because it's Tempting Worm against Burn, Ravenous Rats against Burn, but it's also like this good spoiler because it has like point removal against 12-12, and it can limit their ability to hold back cards to protect their 12-12 even after they've successfully gone off. And also, in like, if you're playing the pit version, in the mid game they can never go off, right? Like they can never assemble the combo unless they have Gush, and it's pretty dicey against a deck with removal. So it's got that, and it's also a burn deck because it's like, what is the rack? The rack is just a one-sided sulfuric vortex, lady.
Yeah.
Like this is the card that
rack,
you love.
Curse Scroll.
Yeah, and here's the card that nobody's been talking about that I think is probably insane in this deck. Funeral Charm. Funeral Charm is like, it's a poor man's Cabal therapy that also kills Ball Lightning and Jackal Pup when they cast it. Like it, or Bird of Paradise. It seems awesome to me.
So I guess the only thing that's really holding it back, in a sense, so in many ways, we're kind of just describing the Rock again, because you can't really exploit this deck.
This is not the Rock. The Rock's problem is it generates incremental card advantage in a very ponderous, boring, useless way.
The Rock has
no clock.
It has no beatdown. But that's what I'm saying. So, if it basically, like, one, we sort of have to identify some weakness, or else we're just saying this is the deck, right? Because one, it does feel very unexploitable, but like if it's unexploitable, that means the other thing that's probably going on is that it's probably just not very consistent. Like it probably has some hands where it just doesn't draw a threat. Right.
The biggest knock against the Rock variants in pre-modern is just the mana, right? Like your mana sucks. Like all the who has better mana? 16 islands and 2 Mistress Factories, 16 to 18 mountains and some barbarian rings, or some people will play a Mistress Factory there also. Not naming any names, so there might be a Mistress Factory there. Like, who has better mana? Those people are like, I don't know, man. How many swamps do I need to
Yeah,
cast?
I mean,
Wood.
I probably
You
won
know?
half my games against your black green deck playing burn, just because you
My
can't.
mana just didn't
Yeah,
come out right.
yeah, you can't. You can't cast your spells in the order that you want to on the turns that you want to. It's like a huge, and you take damage, right? It's kind of a huge deal. So
That's the thing, right?
but that
You
begs
have
the
to
question: How do you can you fix the mana for these decks?
you could play the mono black version, then you don't get Tempting Worm, right? Like, is Skittering Surge as good as Tempting Worm? No, but it's pretty good. It's a good card.
Yeah, but that deck, I mean, that deck was a deck, and it wasn't doing so. So was it? People
Hardly
didn't
was
figure
a
it
deck
out.
because people were exploding cars at it. Well, also you can't really explode cars against the black green deck because it has Tempting Worm. And so I don't know. This deck's obviously exploitable. It's not the most powerful deck, but it seems pretty good against most of the powerful decks. If people are going to go mono replenish and enchantress, like incredibly powerful draw engines, infinite draw engines in the case of replenish, this deck is finite resources.
Yeah.
Right? Like, so you're not gonna. I draw 1,000 cards. Like, okay, yeah, that's more cards than I can make you discard with my bottomless pit per turn, right? Like, I have infinite mana, infinite vigilance, and make all your cards disappear.
Okay. So here's the rub. Basically, is that there's a few ways to beat a tempting worm. One is to play a deck that has permanence, which is actually hard to do in pre-modern, because in pre-modern all the spells are much better than the permanence.
Well, this is, you wouldn't run a tempting worm out against Andy Levine, right? Like, just gonna put like a bunch of lands into play, and the cards that he doesn't put into play are all counter spells and AKs. Right? It's horrible. You can't do that there.
I don't know. You might have to, right? Because
gotta
on
be
the other hand, Levine's deck is not like, we're talking about Mono Blue Tide. Mono Blue Tide doesn't like to see a 5/5 on the battlefield. Like, yeah, if they kept
That's true.
If they're on the draw and they kept like a 4-lander, they're going to be hyped to see all those islands, but they're going to still have to do something about the 5/5.
So here are some cards that people don't play that they could just go into the black green deck, and like, people, one of these is a card that I thought of immediately when I started playing pre-modern, but nobody played it, so I just didn't try it. Here are some cards to try. Gloom from Mengu is one of the ones that I think people should think about. Like, Mengu is very hype on Gloom. If you watch his,
people were super, like, people kept on pitching Gloom, and Fran and I kept on shooting down Gloom, because I don't think that Gloom is it against the Replenish deck. I think Replenish can do too much stuff about it, but I think it makes a lot of sense if your sequence, involves Gloom plus like 3/3s and 5/5s instead of like attacking with Mishra's Factory, because it felt like the Mishra's Factory was too easy to contain, and eventually you would just attunement yourself into, I mean, not that I like attunement against black decks, but like eventually you would just cast 7 mana Replenish and win, because you have soul lands in your deck.
Yeah, but you're gonna get killed first in this deck, right? That's one. The other one that I think is really
quick aside, we said earlier that you needed Seal of Cleansing to take care of the Gloom after you cast your 7 mana Replenish. You actually just pay 3 mana to exile the Gloom with the first Parallax activation, and then you make infinite mana, and then you can let the Gloom come back, and then
you're fine at this.
Yeah. So it is 10 mana, right? So you have to cast 7 mana Replenish and 3 mana activation, but you don't need Seal of Cleansing in the mix. If you happen to get the Seal of Cleansing under the Gloom, or Dystopia, a very popular card in these black decks, then obviously they're cooked.
Dystopia seems stains to me.
Yeah,
it's too slow.
But I think
also,
Gloom
kills your Tempting Worm.
Yeah.
I mean,
you can't play Dystopia. But so basically, I'll say this: Gloom is an interesting card. It's a very narrow card, because there's just not a lot of white decks that play 4 mana white cards.
I think Black Green is this version of Black Green, not the survival version. This version of Black Green we were talking about is a generalist in game 1, and then becomes a surgeon after sideboarding. That's kind of how I'm thinking about it, right? So here's the other card that is even more narrow than Gloom, but is baller in a deck that can make your opponent not play the game. Choke.
But then your rack won't get in.
Dude, they can't play Magic.
It's interesting. I think it is too narrow.
So, okay, worst case scenario, Carpet of Flowers.
Yeah, I like Carpet a lot better because it's 1 mana instead of a bunch, and you benefit to some extent, I guess, from... Well, you can just go pretty fast. Like Carpet is just like a endless dark ritual, right? But I still think Hidden Gibbons is just awesome. Better than the above. After a short break from work, we were talking about black decks, which means the ultimate question is, why is Mystic Enforcer the new best creature in pre-modern? Discuss.
I played against a Mystic Enforcer this week. It ate an Incinerate. 1 Incinerate, not 2.
Well, there's nobody's gonna be playing Incinerate anymore. There's gonna be no more Incinerates.
I gotta say, Mystic Enforcer brick walls black-green survival.
It brick walls every Black X deck that in this format now.
Their flying creature is a 1/1 with Echo.
That doesn't kill Mystic Enforcer, notably.
And their green creatures, for the most part, are smaller than a 6/6, right? They've got a 5/5 for 2. That's what they've got. You have to pair it with Armageddon, right? Otherwise, they're just going to infinite combo you. I think I just want to put this out there. If you're on the black-green survival deck,
you believe in the sideboard
if you don't have
combo.
access to the Great Way combo or the Palinchron combo, whatever you want to call it, you're an idiot. You can't win the mirror match. I mean, you can win the mirror match basically by luck in top decks, right? Like you have to have an unmolested Withered Wretch. That's basically the way that it would.
So Phil,
and if you don't, you're dead.
Phil Bunch of Numbers is X and O in the mirror, and he says that the most important thing is not going to time.
You know what makes you not go to time? Winning on turn 4.
Yeah, I mean, I saw you Palinchron in the mirror, so I'm a believer. It's just a question of sideboard space.
I also think it's a really good. It's so cheap, Lanny. It's like 1 Palinchron and an extra.
Yeah, you had to cut the Tempting Worm, the 4th Tempting Worm, the most important
part. The Tempting Worms aren't good in this deck. They're fine. I don't know, man. What I don't have is you suggested playing Spike Feeder instead of Ravenous Baloth. That's a pretty substantial downgrade in every case except for you're going off. I
don't think you need to win on the spot, right? Because you'll have infinite squirrels, infinite cards. Your opponent will have 0 cards.
No cards in it.
Yeah. There's nothing. I don't think there's any top deck in the pre-modern format that gets you out of that besides a Chrome's Vengeance.
A Wrath of God or Chrome's Vengeance type thing zeros the game, which is annoying, right? But the thing is, you'll have every card. You have your entire deck in your hand, though. No, you don't have to go that deep.
Yeah, but you could. You understand what I'm saying? It's you have any creature that you want and any interaction spell that you want. I'm sure you can figure it out.
If you empty your opponent's hand and then just keep the Recurring Nightmare in your hand, you're just going to draw the squee and then just go off again the next turn.
Yeah, exactly. Because you just so for people who are uninitiated, if you have Palinchron, Recurring Nightmare,
or Great Whale,
and 7 lands, right? Every Recurring Nightmare loop nets you 1 mana. And if you have Survival Infinities play, which you probably do because you have a Palinchron, which
because these cards are all 1/ofs.
You're not trying to draw.
You can't cast.
You're not trying to draw on your own. So, if Survival Infinities in play, you then can get a Wall of Blossoms, and so now you're making infinite mana and making infinite cards because you're going Wall of Blossoms, Palinchron, +1 mana, +1 card, right? So I have infinite cards, infinite mana. With infinite cards and infinite mana, what do? It's now you have infinite Deranged Hermit activations and infinite Sadistic Hypnotist activations, which means your opponent has 0 cards in hand. You have infinite squirrels. And they have no battlefield because you can also get Masticore, which means that you'll be able to shoot down all their creatures.
With your infinite mana.
Yeah. Even a Mystic Enforcer.
Oh, yes. Infinite is bigger than 6 or 3. It might only be 3.
Well, I pay 4 mana for 3/3s all the time in this format, so I might as well get pro black for it.
Out of the graveyard. Does Mystic Enforcer naturally have flying only when threshed?
Only when threshed, yeah.
This guy is not good, Lanny. He's just straight up.
Listen, my call to action is somebody play it and tell me it's not good. I'm not going to just believe anybody who says, oh, it doesn't look good. Because I think that it looks okay. And 6/6 is massive in pre-modern, right? So we had...
6/6 flying protection from removal is excellent if the best removal weren't a white card, and the next best removal also weren't a white card.
All I'm saying is that we had Meddling Mage. Meddling Mage used to be the biggest creature in pre-modern. Actually, Goblin Lackey was the biggest creature in pre-modern, right? And then Goblin Lackey, Mark Fanatic, biggest creatures in pre-modern. Then we entered in the era of Meddling Mage. Meddling Mage became the biggest creature in pre-modern, but then you had to have Call of the Herd. Call of the Herd, biggest creature in pre-modern house. Call of the Herd in Mishra's Factory, sharing
2/3/3s for 7.
Sharing the title of biggest creatures in pre-modern. And then you had Wall of Blossoms, can block all of the above really well. So what did we have to do?
I mean, you had Maniacs like Mengu, which is like an Elves deck, no anger, like 7 walls for Call of the Herd. Like that was the strategy.
Yeah, Meddling Mage Call of the Herd, Mishra's Factory, we're not going to get through that. So, of course, we had to turn to Beast Attack in the trying times. But Beast Attack
does eventually get through Wall of Blossoms, but not Wall of Roots.
But Beast Attack and Frontside Decree of Justice had one fatal flaw. That is, of course, Exalted Angel. Exalted Angel, new biggest card in the format, 4/5 flyer. What are you going to do? Exalted Angel can't get beat except for by, you guessed it, Eternal Dragon, 5/5 flyer. And guess what? Black removal, not that good against it, because for 11 mana, or 12 mana, the low price of 12 mana, I just get Eternal Dragon Eternal.
My God, is white removal good against that card?
And so you come to me in your trying time and you say, Lanny, I can't handle all these creatures, these Anurid Brushhoppers, Elephant Tokens, Exalted Angels. What do I turn to? None other than 6/6 flying, protection from black, if and only if you have 7 or greater cards in your graveyard. But if you get it, it's a house. Flying is so good.
Phyrexian Furnace is already one of the best sideboard cards in the format. And I'm not a big Tormod script guy, but people play it.
Yeah, that's true. But then you have a 3/3 left over, and your opponent discarded a card.
Okay, the decks that play 0 mana, exile your graveyard, don't typically care about just a 1-for-1 exchange of card advantage. They're typically decks that have tons of cards because they have accumulated knowledge engines or something.
Right, I'm splashing for Meltdown. It'll be fine.
Okay. And then the ones with Phyrexian Arena, Phyrexian Furnace are already playing that card because it is literally like the arrow to the knee for black-green survival. Like, it doesn't kill black-green survival, but my God, is it hard for them to run a marathon with that card.
And it's relevant against Terravor and everything. This is definitely like the era of Phyrexian Furnace. I completely agree with you that
I might be 4 Furnace right now instead of 3.
I mean, I would go 2 main, 2 side in every deck.
I actually don't disagree with you. When I was on, not when I was on Team Ultra Pro, but when I was on, I can't remember the hell the name of the team was, but it was a good team. Like Eugenius was on it and Osip, and I got accused of ruining playtesting because my green beatdown deck had 2 main deck Scrabbling Claws. Scrabbling Claws is the
new bordered,
the new bordered Phyrexian Furnace, and I'm like, why is this bad? Like, and they're like, because you beat me, and I'm like, yeah, like you were playing cards. Like, the format is like, this was the premiere of Golgari Grave Troll and Stinkweed Imp were like new cards in the format. I'm like, this seems like a pretty good card if people are playing, Stinkweed Imp and Golgari Grave Troll. Like, I'm sorry for ruining playtesting. Like, your deck literally had Nostalgic Dreams in it. Nostalgic Dreams is legal in pre-modern, right?
Yeah, it's a card everybody should be familiar with. GG Regrowth.
So I'm like, I don't know, man. Mike ruins playtesting. He played Scrabbling Claws in the main deck.
I mean, you certainly would, right? It's an interesting one because back in the day, you didn't have the spread of information. So, like, if you brought a deck to playtesting that people didn't think that anybody else was going to play, you were breaking it. You're just like, well, this isn't useful because everyone else is just not going to have this card. But then you could just simply say, it's like, okay, well, we win this matchup unless they find Scrabbling Claws, and then move on.
I thought, like, Scrabbling Claws isn't bad. It's like 2 mana for cycling. Like, that's like the worst case scenario, right? And my deck is whatever, had extra mana because it's like bird, elf, sword, centaur type deck. You know?
I don't know. I mean, so what are the Swords of Plowshares decks? Terra Get In and Replenish.
And Landstill variants.
Landstill's back on the menu. I lost to Landstill playing Dr. Surf and Surf the other day. They cast a null. I had a misdirection. I was like pretty ready, and they just annulled.
One of the few decks that's actually good against Dr. Surf and Surf. And I don't. Is it good against Black-Green Survival in game 1?
No, it can't be. It can't be.
No, what about main deck Phyrexian Furnace?
I mean,
that's like 3 main deck Phyrexian Furnace sometimes.
I mean, you can, but you get the survival. You just need to keep
It's arrow to the knee, man.
You have
it's not arrow to the
just
head.
Put more
arrow to the knee's pretty bad.
More Scavenger Folk Utabi Orangutan in your deck, and you'll be fine. That'll just be the first thing you get with survival. I don't think it's that big.
Bad. It slows them down a lot.
Yeah. But Black-Green Survival is already a slow deck, right? And then the whole rest of the deck is like pretty solid, like just guys, right?
Could this be the era of 23andMe?
No.
Phyrexian Furnace.
No. F-, please see teacher.
We have Dismantling Blow.
No.
Draw.
You can't even Dismantling Blow a Phyrexian Furnace because they'll activate it in response.
Costs far too much. I was like going through cards, like white cards for Sam's deck, and I got to a Dismantling Blow, and I'd already lost so much interest in 23andMe, and I was just like, I didn't even take it out of the box. And then I was just like, I can't believe I bought those Wooded Foothills. But luckily, I can put them in Sam's deck.
I think this thread of undiscovered creatures is worth tugging on. I think Annured Brushhopper should be in. I think Mystic Enforcer should be in.
If we're going to go this direction, I would so much rather play Bird Elf into Annured Brushhopper on turn 2 and Exalted Angel on turn 2. Just like mid-range version of Beefcake. Like it doesn't have Beefcake's explosiveness, but it just wins every fair game.
I mean, Exalted Angel is just too much, right? Because you just can't play like your Winter Orb Tangle Wire Exalted Angel deck.
But like turn 2 Exalted Angel is a good line.
Well, you have
if people don't answer it, you just flip it on turn 3.
I mean, it is a good line against Duress 2/2. It's a great line against Tempting Worm.
It's a fantastic line against Tempting Worm, and the deck has other stuff, right? Look, this deck is going to have Baloths. It's going to have like just some beef.
No,
right?
Baloth. Baloth is in the awkward, like no deck can cast it. Any deck that can cast it would rather cast Terravore, and it doesn't brawl with like. It doesn't brawl.
So here's the problem.
It doesn't brawl with Tempting Worm. Like Baloth.
Tempting Worm is so much better on the battlefield than Baloth is. But you can't play Tempting Worm main deck in a green-white deck in the same way that you can in a green-black deck. Like you're just like, I'm just gonna have Tempting Worm in my deck. Like
that's why you're playing green-black-white at this point.
It's horrible with with like Bird Elf, right? Like
you're playing green-black-white because what's the answer to Tempting Worm? Permanence. What's the answer to permanence? You guessed it, Vindicate. Tempting Worm, Vindicate the thing. I did a 5-mana 5/5.
Swords of Plowshares is pretty good against all these cards.
They can't have 10 Swords of Plowshares. You duress Cabal Therapy them.
In green, black, white.
Yes. Swords of Plowshares. Okay. Junk Tempting Worm Phil's deck. Can we just cut? Okay. Final discussion point. What's the deal with Weathered Wayfarer?
I used 2 Barbarian Rings on it because the game was going long. They might have killed me, but he had 3 in a row. The third one killed me.
I mean, what is
it's a freaking 1/1 for 1 on like turn 15, but I was dying to the sulfuric.
Well, I put 2 things out there. 1 is Weathered Wayfarer the White Goblin Lackey, or 2 is Weathered Wayfarer forcing you to build the worst deck in the world to get the least interesting payoff in the world. So I
will just throw it out there that Andy Levine with his control decks just ignores Weathered Wayfarer, and it's fine.
Well, how can you ignore it if you get all your stuff wastelanded though? Because Levine's deck has it. That's what I thought,
and he just ignored it, and he
just plays a land and then gets it wastelanded, and then
but they can only play 1 land a turn, same as you, and he's also drawing extra cards. He just counters their big thing.
I mean, it's
his entire thesis was like
just counter the big thing. Yeah,
they're setting themselves behind, right? Like they always have to be behind to be operating it, and I'm just going to draw land with my AK. and cast
So,
it, and then
but
they
they board in the Pyroblast, and
Well,
if
he's
they put Lotus Veil in their Weathered Wayfarer deck, then they can be ahead and behind at the same time. All right, let me finish. In column A, we have on one side, Weathered Wayfarer is the White Goblin Lackey. Agree or disagree?
I think it's closer to the White Bird of Paradise. It's just a lightning rod on turn 1.
So, sure, but that works for the Lackey argument too.
No, but Lackey. Here's the thing: an uncontested Bird of Paradise sometimes gets you and sometimes doesn't.
Okay.
Same as Weathered Wayfarer. Like an uncontested Goblin Lackey. I don't want to roll them dice. Like that's not dice I want to roll.
All right. So this card is in what some are saying is a tier 1 deck. It's the tier 1 deck is also basically built around this. Like you have Mox Diamond in your deck for crying out loud. You're basically saying Mox Diamond is so good that it's worth playing Weathered Wayfarer. So much so that you would take out the primary benefit of playing a card like Weathered Wayfarer in your deck, which is not having to play lots of lands. This deck plays lots of lands and Weathered Wayfarer. Well, it doesn't play. I don't think it plays 28. I think it plays like 26. 24, 25, 4 and 4. Like it just plays a ton of lands. But some of the lands you're playing are utility, lest we not overlook that Wasteland is supposed to be a spell, except for the fact that if your opponent doesn't have non-basic lands in their deck, which I guess fewer and fewer pre-modern decks are, like Wasteland, is becoming a spell. You've got Russian Import, which is a spell. So yeah, Phil's got 26.
Feels like it's 27.
But I've seen, it looks like 26 to me. It looks like 6 times 4 plus 2.
Core Haven. There's a Core Haven off to the side.
Okay. Well, it's in the sideboard.
Yeah. Sorry.
It's this 27 land is inside. But anyways,
no, I said off to the side. Yeah.
We can grab the average Terrageddon deck from TC decks. I think they're all between 24 and 24 and this one has first one I pulled out has 28. Next one I pulled out has 28. Next one I pulled out has 28. Okay, the first 4 had 28. This one has 27.
I would have guessed 28, and so Phil's is 26 plus 1.
Okay, I guess some of these are 20.
That's like 36 mana in the main deck.
It is, well, because you have 8. You have 4 Mox Diamond, 4 Weathered Wayfarer. So this is what I'm saying. Like, what if your opponent is like, well, I don't care about Weathered Wayfarer.
Terrageddon is a combo deck. Like the combo is just Terravor Armageddon. And if you don't,
so why don't you put cards that aren't Weathered Wayfarer next to that combo, right?
So here's what I was thinking. What if we played all non-basic lands, and instead of Weathered Wayfarer,
we just played Hermit Druid.
Play Hermit Druid.
Yeah.
Right, and then you have one reanimate and one Frozen whatever, Frozen Reclamation.
Yeah.
One reanimate.
Well, it has to be a Shallow Grave because you need haste unless you're gonna activate.
I'm sorry. Yeah, fine. One Shallow Grave rather than one reanimate. Just one. And then with the Terravors are already just good by themselves, and you lightning rod the Hermit. If they don't kill the Hermit, you just kill them.
I mean, we're talking about another deck, right? Having all non-basic lands is a liability against opposing.
This deck has like 4 basic lands right now.
I know, but it has the fetches too, which count as virtual non-basic lands, which helps against opposing dastardly wasteland strategies, right?
But I don't think Wasteland's going to be a problem. Our deck is 1,000 lands and 4 Moxes. Like, we're literally going to go first turn Hermit Druid. What do you got, friend? Right? Like, and the thing is, if they answer the Hermit Druid, you're just a Terravor deck. It's fine. Straight up fine.
You need like some card selection. But okay.
Oh, this deck, I think, Lanny, is probably a pretty good Miri's Guile deck because we could Miri's Guile into the combo.
I mean, yes, but guess what? You can't play with your non-basic lands, fetch lands, which are kind of important for Miri's Guile to be functional. Okay.
All these. Here's the problem with all these third tier cards, every freaking Terravor and Miri's Guile. Yes, if you glue them together in a certain way, you could come up with a deck. But they all have these crazy liabilities. This is what Sam was talking about. He's I don't even like the one replenish in my deck.
Yeah.
Right? It creates a fault point. Dr. Surf and Surf never has these discussions.
Yeah.
They're like,
what?
I drew Dominate in the mirror match. Like, how idiotic. Dominate? Oh, my opponent was making me discard cards, and I drew the third sideboarded accumulated knowledge.
Yeah. Meanwhile, I'm like sitting here. I'm like, look, now that we're deep into this Miri's Guile hole, we have to play Latinam's Legacy, so we can shuffle extra copies of Miri's Guile.
We were literally having a conversation about whether or not Limdul's Vault was better than Sleight of Hand this week. Like, Sleight of Hand is clearly a better card than Limdul's Vault, but no, Limdul's Vault. For the low price of 2 mana and God knows how much life points, we can look at the top few cards of our library and pray. Like,
I mean, there's no way to tutor a Buried Alive in this format in black-blue, so we're left with Limdul's Vault. What can you say? We'd play Vampiric Tutor, obviously.
But Vampiric Tutor would be busted.
No doubt about that. But yeah,
the problem is all these cards are just blue cards. Like,
yeah.
Right now, the black cards are green cards.
Yeah, no shit.
We would transform them quickly into blue cards.
All right, so this leads me to the next point, which is like, what is going on with Weathered Wayfarer? It's like, can we just like play the deck without Weathered Wayfarer? Can we play stuff instead of Weathered Wayfarer? Or do we have to like
mulch?
Mulch is the same card. Like, it's just
mulch is an immediate payoff, and it's highly synergistic. It's not a 1/1 dirtle.
You don't have to be lower than your opponent to play it. I think mulch is like super proven to not be it though.
But sometimes you just mulch and it's just like Ancestral Recall. You're just like Treetop Village, Richard on Port Wasteland. Your opponent's like, I can't even win.
I mean, look, if you're gonna play 28 lands in Mox Diamond, I'm more on board with mulch than I am Weathered Wayfarer. But there's some sort of aspect here, which is just that, like, okay, you get the Weathered Wayfarer, then you get the Rishadan ports, and then you Armageddon them after you're like double porting them, so like they really put all their lands into play. And that's the thing. It's like, I'm just so look, I guess I'm just going deeper and deeper into this hole of just like, what does this Terrageddon deck do? Like, what is it? It just plays meddling. Like, it just has, sometimes it has Meddling Mage, sometimes it has Weathered Wayfarer.
Here's my thought. We're just playing on a similar axis. The Terrageddon deck doesn't actually draw cards, except kind of with Weathered Wayfarer.
Sylvan Library.
Kind of, right? Like, it's down a card and they can pay 4
to port in. Yeah.
Okay. Like, this is a very kind of card, right? What if, and then their ace in the hole Armageddon is symmetrical, and they try to break it with Moxes, which, you know, cool, you kind of break it, but you had to go down cards.
Yeah, you also discarded a card, so it's like, if you if you didn't have the Mox, you might have just had an extra land in your hand.
Yeah,
and then
it's very like, all right, but here's the thing: could be like a very like 2 + 2 = 5, right? It's not really a 1 + 1 = 3, but it could be like a 2 + 2 = 5. What if, instead of that, we were just playing... Okay, I'm also a green creature deck with Disruption. But instead of Weathered Wayfarer, I have Funeral Charm. Instead of instead of Armageddon, I have Stupor, right? Instead of not having any cards in hand, I have the Rack.
Well, Phil's deck was a Mox Wayfarer deck.
Like, this is just... Yeah, but I'm just saying, like, I think that there are good ideas, and we can cross-pollinate them. Phil putting Tempting Wurm into this junk Terravorce shell was just like,
Red
Jump Shark.
Wurm,
it's just
junk Wormageddon. You don't have to play 4 Terravores, but you can. I mean, the thing is, Mox and Wayfarer to a certain extent definitely fix mana. So I'm a fan of this idea that the thing that makes this deck good is that it gets to play all of the colors.
Dude, if they fix mana at the cost of playing Undiscovered Paradise and Gemstone Mine. Like, Phil's like had games where he just like was tapping Gemstone Mines to operate at a basic level and praying that he was going to draw.
Yeah.
Right? Like,
I do agree that that first I'm going to play Gemstone Mine, then I'm going to play Wayfarer, then I'm going to strategically let my Gemstone Mine go to the graveyard so that I can get a fetch land, and then I'm going to fetch, and then while the fetch is on the stack, I'm going to tap my Mox Diamond so that I can then get a Wasteland, and at the end of all of this, you just like count up the equity that you've gained, and it's like you're up 3%. You're like,
So here,
you did about as good as an index fund. Like if you cast Portent once, you would have gotten the same benefit.
so here's the, and you wouldn't have had to put all these cards in your deck.
That's what I'm saying.
So like,
Okay, we're two on the same page.
The doctor is never unhappy to draw the impulse.
Weathered Wayfarer is like one of the leading card strategies of the format, and I just don't understand like why that is.
I'm just saying.
Is it good against black green mid range? Black green pit, wormless pit.
Horrible. Right?
Is it?
And also,
is it good against? Is it good against Dr. Surf and Surf?
Well, I don't know. Sometimes it's.
It's good against Replenish. It's good against Replenish.
Lanny, what about this? In the same way that Tempting Worm allows all these green splashing decks to jump the shark on red, what if these decks just like, or I'm just a sideboard Terravore. So you're a Terravore deck. You could do all the work you want. I'm just going to cast Terravore. Like I'm borrowing all of this stuff that you do. Isn't that just the same thing as Tempting Worm coming in against red? And also Terravore has a bunch of text on it that's like pretty good.
I mean, I just like the idea of Terravore plus like discard, because they're like going to discard lands to the discard spells. Like that's just so much better than like trying to make Weathered Wayfarer do the thing for you. But it's like just so crazy because I think
that's what I'm saying. Start with Phil's deck, take out Weathered Wayfarer, put in Hermit Druid. It's only like 2 cards you have to add into your deck, and like this is actually just hyper functional.
You also just don't have to cut. You don't have to cut all the basic lands. You can just put in Hermit Druid and then just like sometimes hit a basic land, but like other times, like but you're still putting a bunch of cards in your graveyard, which is good.
Your Hermit Druids are so not likely to live that might not be a big deal. But I really kind of want to win the game if I tap my Hermit Druid. That's the thing.
I mean, that's just because that's the baseline for Hermit Druid, but you can do slightly worse. I mean, this is a concept that Phil put into execution, where he just like had a Hermit Druid deck that like put a lot of cards in the graveyard. Like if you just put a bunch of Call the Herd in the graveyard, you might be fine. But I don't know. I guess I'm not anywhere closer to figuring out like, you know, what's happening. This Terragen deck is obviously very successful. Rich is like shaking in his boots. He's like, I don't actually know how to build my Replenish deck to beat this Terragen deck. And I'm just like, shrug. Like, what if they just don't draw the cards they need? Like, they only have a few that matter. Meddling Mage, Weathered Wayfarer, like Wasteland. You have pretty good coverage against Port.
The problem is the combination of Port, Wasteland, Armageddon is just poison for
the all 4-mana sorcery deck. Yeah,
like, but
you can
they don't
fight.
have to be good. Like they can just keep him off his game.
I mean, he plays 26. He's plays 26 lands and 6 soul lands. Like all you have to do is like, oh no, you got all my non-basics. I just have island planes.
What is his baseline defense against creatures in game 1?
I mean, win, Swords to Plowshares, paralyze, like everything.
No. Just like if he doesn't win, what is his baseline? It's Swords to Plowshares, right?
Yeah.
What is the absolute best card against Swords to Plowshares in the format?
Mishra's Factory.
Come on.
Yeah, Meddling Mage, right?
Well, Call of the Herd is the card.
Call of the Herd is awesome too, yeah.
Meddling Mage and Call of the Herd.
But Call of the Herd is so bad against Parallax Wave.
Yeah, but the whole thesis is they're not going to get to the wave in the same way. Obviously, if the game goes infinite, they're going to get whatever they want, right? But they have this combination of Armageddon, Rishadan Port, Wasteland, Weathered Wayfarer, sometimes Cataclysm, like that just keep you off of being able to like just pick and choose your 4-mana spells.
This is all we do. We just don't have attunement in our deck. And we have 26 lands.
By the way, Mox is very good in this recipe.
And we have a bunch of soul lands. And then we just get to 4 mana with our soul lands and like and our not attunement, and then we just cast our spells. Like they don't draw any cards. Like we can draw cards. We can just like play Fact or Fiction. We can like soul land into fact. Like if you just cast Fact or Fiction once, aren't you just like 10 like way ahead because you just drew 2 lands in a spell? It doesn't even have to be a good spell.
Doesn't Rich have Sabo's Web in his deck? Sabo's Web seems like it would do a little damage.
I mean, it helps against the Port. It helps. You can sometimes catch a Wasteland. I don't think it's
time
bad.
is pretty good.
Yeah, I mean that's the other thing. It's just like, okay, if your opponent is playing like the Ray of Revelation, Weathered Wayfarer game, like, you know, I don't know. It's like Weathered Wayfarer is great against Replenish. Don't get me wrong, but where else is it good? Is it good against I mean, it's good against random decks that want to put lots of lands into play. It's such a weird card to evaluate because so much of the format has already adapted to this concept that you don't want to have a lot of lands in play. So like Weathered Wayfarer is just punishing the decks that haven't adapted, right? Like your opponent can just be goblins, and then Weathered Wayfarer is just like not going to be a thing. You know, the best thing that it does
be in play either.
Yeah, the best thing that it does is it trades with Mog Fanatic, and if your opponent is just like completely indifferent to it, then you're probably dead. Like that's kind of how I feel. And so, Goblins does run a lot of non-basic lands, so
we need to create a new vocabulary, right? So we have this idea of like year one, we have this idea of plan A, we have this idea of plan 2 because we don't want to imply there's only 26 plans. But like I think we have to have this baseline idea of this is what the deck's baseline operations is, right? Like I get my thing executes, what do I get out of it, right? So if I were to describe that for like the red deck, you're like, okay, unopposed, I'm like 1 drops into burn spells and ball lightning. If I'm unopposed, I can win on call it turn 4, and it's hard for you to interact with me, especially if I draw a lot of 1-mana spells, right? This can be interacted with, right? And so like that's where we start to think about things that aren't just like the baseline. The baseline for a deck like black green discard. I don't know what we want to call this deck, like pitless
Black Wurm,
Black Wurm or whatever. You know, like Ebony. Wait, what's the name of the card you like? Ebony Maw.
Yeah, Ebony Wurm.
And no, what's the one that you like?
I like Ebony Maw. Yeah,
but his ability is called Black Tongue.
Oh, I don't know what that.
Maw means there. Mouth.
Yeah,
his like actual ability is called Black Tongue. So, so we just call the deck Ebony Maw. So Ebony Maw has like a really weird, ambiguous baseline because it's less pure than the earlier versions. The earlier versions were just like empty your hand, kill you with the rack. Here's my fundamental turn. You know, here's my interaction pieces. And then it has context, right? Because like, you know, one of the reasons this deck might be good is because maybe it's good against 12/12. But like the black-green version is just like, well, sometimes I cast a Tempting Wurm. Sometimes I empty your hand and get you with the rack. Sometimes I have...
Well, I actually think that the black...
Or Curse Scroll.
I mean, I think that the black deck is like pretty linear in the sense that like you don't sleeve up like 12 discard spells, like if that's not your plan, right? So the plan is like discard plus anything.
Well, you know what I like about the bottomless pit coming back to it versus stupor? It's like in the mid game, if your opponent has nothing, you draw stupor, it sucks. But if you mid game, your opponent has nothing, you draw bottomless pit, it locks the game out. Those are very different experiences.
Yeah, but the deck is not playing for that kind of game state, right? Like you
just want to kill them with the rat.
Yeah, if your opponent has nothing, that mission accomplished. If you just draw stupor, then your opponent still has nothing, right? Like you can wait till they have 2 cards in hand. You can like just do it to pick off the 1 card. If they're trying to accumulate cards because you have the rack in play, then stupor is just going to set them back anyways. Like I honestly don't think that that's bad. And I think that like Tempting Wurm really cracks the code because the difference between discard and counter spells is just very simple, right? Discarding cards counter spells all the same, except for you have to pay mana, your opponent doesn't.
Yeah, so just
that's
the difference.
That's like fundamental, right?
Well, so also sometimes discard can miss.
Right.
Counter spells don't.
Yeah. So what do you have to do to your deck to like? What do you have to do to your deck when you're a counterspell deck? It's like, well, the counterspell deck basically just has to play other instants, right? Because you're always able to trade mana for mana, cards for cards. So the only way you get ahead is by playing cards at instant speed or playing really cheap cards. The discard deck kind of has this like other thing where it's like the discard is going to like chunk off 1 for 1, and then the other half of your deck has to be efficient, and it also has to be like super punchy, right? So I think that fundamentally, I guess mono black clerics aside, discard plus 1/1/2/2 doesn't feel like you're getting enough value about your non-discard cards because you put your opponent off balance, but they can get back into the game.
The most successful decks of that style had one of 3 things. They either had Necropotence, right? So Brian Hacker's deck
had
Necropotence. So just like, I'm like ritualing out Urg Raider.
Oh yeah, let's get to the next.
But I've got more, right? Like, more.
Oh yeah, well we don't have Necro, so what's another one?
He even played Paralyze. It was so mana efficient to get these 2/2s in, right? Or they had Bad Moon, Hacker had Bad Moon and Necropotence, in fact, right? So that made it so that the 2/2s were better.
Right, but Bad Moon needs you to have 3 creatures in play, right? Because otherwise Bad Moon's just as good as a 2/2.
And this was the Michael J version from back when I was, tying for 9th or whatever, is you had Hatred, right? So you had something really good to do with your Dark Ritual. Like and it was highly opportunistic. When Andy's talking about like, oh, is there a combo deck that you could see if the way is clear with your Duress and win on the turn? Hatred is a really good example. It
just costs 1,000 mana.
Well, it kind of, right? Like you built your deck with City of Traders and Dark Ritual in order to cast it. Like no one ever cast that card straight. It was uncastable straight.
Nobody ever tapped 5 swamps for Hatred.
No, I mean I ritualed out Blood Pet so that I could sacrifice the Blood Pets and cast the Hatred the next turn.
Okay.
Which is crazy.
So none of this is happening. Right? Instead, we have Tempting Wurm. So we're just going...
if there's no red decks, Hatred gets a lot better.
I mean... then you need to play small creatures rather than tall creatures, right? I mean, but the thing is, Tempting Wurm is both. It's just crazy that it's both.
That's what I love about the Tempting Wurm is like... it just solves all the problems. Like, we don't have to do this shitty thing. We can just play... all the cards in the black-green deck are awesome. That's one of the things... like, every single card is fantastic.
Well, it's so weird, right? Because Stupor, up until this point, it was just not a card that people wanted to cast. Like, Mano put 1 in his Burning Wish sideboard, which was just, like, the biggest head-scratcher ever, which was just kind of like, I'm going to pay 5 mana to Stupor my opponent? Like, what if they do something... awesome. So, like,
think about it like this. Stupor was good enough to play in Napster. Napster could play Yawgmoth's Will and could tutor for anything. Stupor, and we still played Stupor. Like, just getting people's last 2 cards when you have a 5, like, you get out a 4/3 or a 5/5, you just get their last 2 cards. The game doesn't last very long. That deck had, Richard on Port, Duress, like, you just keep them on the back.
If you were worried about top decking Stupor, you could always play Unburden.
That's not that bad.
No, it was a joke. It was a joke. No Unburden.
It's not that bad.
BB1 Mind Rot Cycling? No.
I've tried Unburden in a lot of decks when it was legal in Standard, and it was never.
You do not have BB1, by the way. Not in your BG mana base. Maybe your BR mana base, but not in your BG mana base.
So here's the problem. Like, are we the kind of people who are going to have access to, whether or not we play it, are we the kind of people who are going to have access to a card like Wall of Blossoms and probably play Treetop Village? Or are we the kind of people who are going to, whether or not we play it, have access to Bottomless Pit and play Tainted Wood?
I think cutting Bottomless Pit was the best thing that all these decks did. I think that you're really, really stuck on it, and I think cutting Pit is like the evolution of the deck.
So it's just so good in the games that it's good. That's the thing that I observed about it.
Right. But that's the thing, is like it's a question of, how good does it have to be? Like, how much better than Stupor does it have to be?
It's like a very good card, and that, like, it's a fault point in the deck.
I mean, Replenish, just like, they can top deck Seal of Cleansing, they can top deck Replenish, and they can also just play their spells like in order. Like, it stops them from doing the setup. I think that Bottomless Pit is super fussy, and I think that ultimately the fact that you ever discard your cards to it is just bad. Like, you don't have to have Bottomless.
I have seen players discard their Tainted Wood like it crate and then just can't cast their card.
Yeah, I mean, it's just so fussy, and Stupor's just so elegant. It's like, you just get it, and you get it right away, and it's good. Like, it's just good always. If your opponent has no cards in hand, then great. If your opponent has cards in hand, then great. Like, you're never going to be unhappy with Stupor. And Bottomless Pit, you're kind of like sitting there like, when am I going to cast the Pit? Like, I'm just going to try to cast the Pit. I need to make sure I have enough lands in play, because then I might draw cards in front of lands. I might green sources.
What's crazy about this is
BB1.
When this deck won Polish Nationals, what was our reaction? We just like kind of shrugged, like, "Oh, that's interesting." And like now, I'm like, "This is just one of the best pre-modern decks ever been built."
No, we were pretty hyped. We were hyped.
No, I mean,
we were excited because there was a lot going on. Because there was Franz Pitless, and then there was also Polish Pitless.
I wanted to play these racks, right? Like, that was the other thing, right?
Yeah, you had bought some racks.
To play the racks.
I think that. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. It's pretty. I think that zero pits is the way forward. Stupor is excellent. Gerard's Verdict is exciting. Just have to see if there's any way to make the mana work.
I think I'm not sure what I was going to play this week at the meetup. I'm very tempted to play the black-green deck. The other decks I kind of want to play are Sam's deck, and part of me wants to play 23andMe. Never.
Yeah, don't waste your time, right? You only play 8 matches of Pre-Modern a month. Don't waste 4 of them on.
I kind of want to play the Fire's Natural Order deck that I sent you. That I think that deck seems sweet.
I mean, Goldfish at least, but make sure you build Sam's deck so that I can borrow it. And I think that you should play Black Green and you should play Pitless. And so the ultimate question is going to be like, maybe, just maybe, this deck is only 60% against Dreadnought, and then it's like not enough. Like, can you imagine? So Duress Cabal Therapy is amazing, right? Because it's good in every phase of the game. There's a huge thing about Duress. Duress stops them from turn 2 Dreadnought, and it stops them from turn 10 Dreadnought with protection, right? So Duress is amazing. Don't get me wrong. Cabal Therapy behaves very similarly in that regard. But what if despite all this, Dreadnought still just wins a lot? Like,
of course it will. So the other deck that I wanted to play was the Doctor. I finally got my Flash of Insights. I have all these Dominates that I ordered. I have the one Thwart.
You can't call it the Doctor, though, because that makes it sound like it's Psychotog, which brings me to my next point. If black is back and blue has always been good, are we just playing Psychotog?
What?
Psychotog is taller than every creature that I mentioned, with the exception of Mystic Enforcer, which Psychotog can't do anything about. But
all right, so what am I doing in this Polish Nationals deck? I'm cutting all the Rotting Giants, all the Wall of Blossoms from the main deck.
Yeah.
And
Ravenous Rats. Yeah.
Play one Wall of Blossoms.
No, we don't need Wall of Blossoms. We're trying to get them to have 0 cards in hand so that we can cast Tempting Worm, we can cast the Rack. I can't believe that the deck contained the Rack and wasn't playing Ravenous Rats. I don't know what I'm not seeing, but Ravenous Rats has got to be the card.
No, Ravenous Rats is clearly fantastic in the Tempting Worm deck of the Sly metagame, right? Like we're going to release this podcast, and it's going to take like 2 years for people to realize that, like, when I'm saying you can't play red anymore, I wasn't kidding. Right?
I think people have been pretty quick on this because red has fallen off a lot online. Its win rate feels like it's been falling off. It fell off for me. We've been talking about it. A lot of the, like, one of the big things that always happened when you talked about burn, like with like you or Aaron or Chris, was like the simple thing would just be like, well, I'm still winning with it. I think that's changing now. I think that's changing after you scrub out. Aaron's a replenished player now.
I 3-1'd on Tuesday.
I'm scrub.
But if people want to beat you, they can just beat. I cannot beat Silver Knight Crusade.
Look, that's always been
Not
true.
happening.
That's always been true. But like the question is not like that part of the curve, right? The question is the fat part of the curve is so much worse for burn right now.
Oh, 1,000,000%. Like the Elves matchup, if they just play Tempting Worm, like, I just don't have no strategy for that.
Yeah.
Right.
But, and so I have the Polish Spirit deck. A reminder, they got second place. They lost Tide Control. So.
Oh, sorry. I thought it was first place because it says number 1 Polish.
No. It's number 1 is the name of the tournament because it's the first. It's the first Polish national.
Okay. Yeah. So still second is still great.
Yeah.
Obviously, 88-person tournament.
Yeah, I think we can get the 4th Stupor in there. I think we cut the Rotting Giant. Do we need a threat? I guess you can just cut the Rotting Giant and go up 1 Curse Scroll and go up 1 Sylvan Library.
Playing some Miri Skiles in this deck, then we have something to do with all these fetch lands. Otherwise, why am I playing fetch lands?
You don't have to play fetch lands. They deal damage.
Adding a Miri Skyle.
I mean, you can still play fetch land Miri Skyle. Or this deck already has 2 Sylvan Library.
I was gonna cut one. I was gonna cut one and play a Miri Skyline here at Sylvan
I
Library.
mean, you're not doing a lot. Oh, you are doing a lot on the ones. So what do you do? Duress and then Miri's Guile plus Duress?
Well, this is
Duress,
like
Miri's
a
Guile plus
very cast 2 or 3 spells in one turn.
ones and threes. God, Miri's Guile. So
I think that I think that 1 Sylvan and 1 Miri's Guile is better than 2 Sylvan in this deck.
honestly, it could just be like 2 Miri's Guile main, 2 Sylvan sideboard, maybe. Because the thing is, this deck really does want you to find the card now, right? So you go look at your top, you need your land, you go. The only problem is that this is
doesn't find the card now. It finds the card next turn, the same as Miri's Guile.
no. I'm saying Miri's Guile is a lot faster because it's one mana.
Okay.
Yeah,
I'm sorry. I thought you were saying that Sylvan Library finds the card.
No. Yeah, I'm saying. I mean, Sylvan Library is like a lot better, but if you're gonna play a lot of fetch lands, I mean, I don't know. It's just so fussy. We could just play Skeletal Scrying. We could just play like. I mean, I think that you're gonna kill me for
Watch
this.
your life total with this deck.
You're gonna kill me with this, but like we could just not play fetch lands and we could just play Phyrexian Arena. You know?
Phyrexian Arena?
Yeah, sure.
There are a lot of enchantments on my list at 3 mana that I wanted to play that's not in the top 5.
I mean, you want something? Graveborn Muse, then fine.
I wouldn't mind 1 Graveborn.
Graveborn Muse kind of gets there. I mean, you can play. I mean, okay. So the deck strategy.
That's a threat also, that's not bad.
The deck strategy.
What if I just played a Terravor?
I don't want fetch lands, right? Bunch of forests, bunch of swamps, treetop village is good. So Terravor asks you to have fetch lands. I think that. So okay, this is what I think. I think you go and you grab a Phil's. You grab a Phil survival deck and then you try to just pull you try to pull the best creature out of Phil's deck. I don't think
Lanny,
it's Deranged.
Oh my god. What if we add some unburdens?
No. Maybe.
I actually think some unburdens is not that bad.
4 Duress, 4 Cabal Therapy, 4 Super. Then you want to add Unburden.
What about how about Undead Gladiator? Then we can just get rid of stuff that's not good, and sometimes you just have a 3/1.
Undead Gladiator. That is not the worst thing that I've heard. I feel like it's like way too much. Like, I feel like this deck wants to cast all the spells in its hand and then spend all its mana attacking with Treetop Village. So
how about those cards are just a cycling land and a second naturalize?
I like cycling lands, and I like
actually. What if they're just 2 cycling lands and we have 25 land?
Interesting. Yeah,
like, there's a lot of operating
something
mana to this deck.
Yeah,
right.
I mean, cycling lands are my favorite in black green, right? Because cycling lands are fixing. They're just like the worst kind, but they get the job done.
That's what I'm saying. I think 2 cycling lands might just be better.
Okay, I'm in.
Okay, so this sideboard could be improved, right? So obviously we're going to keep the 3 naturalize. Actually, Landy, what if we just move 2 Phyrexian Furnace to the main deck and the Silver?
Yeah, let's go.
Done.
Okay.
That was easy. All right.
Sold.
Woo! I just got 2 sideboard slots back. Nice. Okay. Cursed. What do I need Curse Totem for?
I don't know. Maybe Poland loves elves.
Yeah, but you can just play Engineered Plague, and doesn't that even beat Devourer, Engineered Plague?
I mean, nobody plays Devourer right now, so
I think Devourer's gonna have a hard time resolving everything against this deck's hand destruction.
Yeah, well, the big thing is that Engineered Plague doesn't stop anything anymore. Like, the decks are black green mid range, Terra get in, like whatever. Goblins is falling off. Elves, don't get me started. like what are we Engineered Plaguing anymore?
I want to still play Engineered Plague. One of the games against SWB by plaguing elves, obviously getting the 2 for 1. I like Engineered Plague so much more than Infest, and
just friggin' nausea them.
Okay, you know what card is great is Funeral Charm, and one of Funeral Charm's modes is give my Tempting Wurm
2 more power.
No, not getting blocked and chump block this turn.
Swamp Walk.
Yeah.
Oh my god, yeah, because everyone has swamps now. Because this is the new
am
second
not
best color
kidding.
green.
I literally won a PTQ this way in 1999.
Withered Wretch. How about that?
Barf. We're gonna have 4 furnace. We need the 2/2 bear version of furnace also.
What about Braids?
Braids.
The slowest Braids. I literally have to tap 4 lands from our Braids. No Wall of Roots. No nothing.
It's terrible. We could just play like a pit in our sideboard. That would accomplish.
I'm okay with sideboard pit because basically, as you've acknowledged, it's not always better than stupor, but it's sometimes better than stupor. So you can make it so that you have it when you don't have stupor, and it changes. Like the most important thing about sideboarding is being able to transform what you're doing, right? Like playing naturalize, playing like whatever. Sometimes it like just lets you hang in there, but being able to like transform your disruptive beatdown deck into a prison deck is interesting. So I'm down with sideboard
What's
pit.
your plan against the doctor? Like side out like 2 cursed scroll and like a whatever, like a Sylvan Library or Furnace or whatever for like 3 naturalized. Do you even bring the Vendettas in? I guess they're okay.
They're okay. I mean, I just don't want Vendettas in my world. I would just rather have Snuff Out.
I think that they are marginally better than Snuff Out because they're so much better against.
I mean, I'd rather have Smother. I'd rather have.
Oh, we could just play more Smothers than Vendetta.
I'd rather have Diabolic Edict. Like, I don't know.
Diabolic Edict?
Yeah, I'm a Diabolic Edict fan. I'll go on record.
When is it good?
It's against Chroma Angel of Wrath, baby. He has Nimble Mongoose Worship.
Ooh! I could live with against Nimble Mongoose Worship. We can destroy the worship. You know that, right? Like
no, they'll
that's
counter
one
it.
of the modes of this deck.
They'll counter it. You need a little.
No, they
bit more.
won't. They don't have any cards.
Oh yeah, it's true.
Like we're just gonna. They have a 1/1. It's not even a 3/3. It does have Shroud. They have a 1/1. We have a 5/5.
No,
they have 1 life, and the rack is.
Listen, in my world,
Eventually
I've
we're
got a
gonna
Nimble
fall
Mongoose. I've got a Mystic Enforcer. I've got a Worship. I've cast Armageddon. So you're not doing any of that stuff that you thought you were doing, and you're dead.
Yeah. How many times has that gone off well for you?
Always. In my mind, I just did it 1,000 times in a row.
Never failed.
I played it 100 times in my head, and guess what? Nimble Mongoose Worship Mystic Enforcer has never lost the black-green mid-range. We should wrap it up. Black is back. Red's dead. Black-green Pitless Rack. Hype. Terrageddon, still deeply misunderstood by the hosts of this podcast. Go check out Hardcast to hear the goods on it.
So what am I doing? Am I making the black-green deck, Sam's deck, Doctor? None of these decks have been assembled yet, so I have to make them.
Yeah, you have to make Pitless Rack, and you have to make Sam Black's Enchantress. And
If you want Sam's deck for Thursday, I'll just give it to you if you want it.
I would like to. Yeah, I'd probably want to do it. It's just like I'll have to send you the list that I want, but it's like 2 Firestorm Side, 2 Hidden Gibbon's Bane.
Do you? I don't. Never mind. I'm one of the cards might be New Border.
That's fine. The new border Battlefield Forge that you took from your disassembled Rifter deck, which is never seeing the light of day again.
Andy Levine bought me an old bordered one, but I miscounted how many lands I needed to own.
Fair enough.
Because I only own one. I only own one Grand Coliseum. I'm like, I saw it in the box. I'm like, oh, I must own Grand Coliseums, but I own one. This is not a big dilemma. Like there might be one.
Promo code Flores. This has been Spike Colony Season 2, Episode 15. Pre-modern 10 out of 10. Like,
I'm so. On one hand, I'm so excited because like it's like everything is kind of new.
There's so many decks I want to play. So I want to play Threshold Pile. I'm excited about Billy's green-white survival deck, and I want to just cut all the Weathered Wayfarers and add all the Mystic Enforcers.
Every one of these green-white, I try to make green-white creature decks all the time too, and the problem is they're just like expect your opponent to be playing fair. If your opponent's playing fair, like, oh, I'm the king of the playground.
Listen, I am going to survival for 4 Glow Riders, and then you will be done.
Oh yeah, that's what's gonna happen.
Yes, I'm going to survival for 4 Glow Riders.
Need to do that? The problem is not.
I don't need turns because the first glow rider time walks you so that I can cast the second glow rider. Like, what don't you understand?
1/3s at me.
Turn 1.
Legion of 1.
Turn 1. There are 2 1s. Thank you very much. Turn 1. Bird of Paradise. Turn 2. Survival of Fittest. Get Glow Rider. Turn 3. Glow Rider. 4 Glow Rider. 5 Glow Rider. 6 Glow Rider. What is any deck that has non-creature spells going to do against that? Can't be done. Can't be done.
All the decks we like have like
5 mana Swords Plowshares. 7 mana Engineered Plague. 7 mana Infest. Glow Rider. 4 Glow Riders. 4 Meddling Mages. Guess what? They're both clerics. Shared Triumph naming cleric.
What if they just Vendetta the first Glow Rider and then play an Engineered Plague?
Then I have Survival in play. Easy game.
All right.
Love Spy
Sounds
Colony. But yeah, so sorry. I want to play that. I want to play Mystic Enforcer. I want to play a Mystic Enforcer deck. I've like 6/6 flying. Like, come on. Has to be that.
I want to play the Fire's natural.
No. Okay. I did play Giant Growth Red Green Beatdown. And then I slowly came to the conclusion that Giant Growth isn't it. And then I slowly came to the conclusion that there's actually no green cards that you want to play in this deck. Like, that's why Sylvan Library Naturalize ended up in the main deck. Because part of the problem is that you need forest, right? So if you have all mountain, you just play all red cards. You don't have to worry about pips. But now when you're playing a 2-color deck, you're like, oh, well, I need to go R into GR into RRG, and then you're kind of like, well, what happens if I draw 2 forests? Then I need a few more green cards. And like, what green cards are there? It's like just Sylvan Library Naturalize. Like, Giant Growth just isn't it. Like, Pouncing Jaguar isn't going to be it. Like, Sky Shroud Elite is not going to be it. So
meanwhile, your opponent could have just cast a Tempting Worm, which outclasses every creature in your deck.
Yeah. Lest we forget that Tempting Worm is obviously completely dominating the format, and you can't do anything about it. But I still want to work on Red Green Beatdown. There might be something there. I want to play a blue. I'm like, okay, Weather Wayfarer, I'm on board if all it does is tap to get islands so that I can cast Gush, and then I keep tapping my Weather Wayfarer to get Lotus Veil to sacrifice those islands again to keep tapping my Wayfarer. I want to do that. Obviously, I love Vindicate, so I think this Wayfarerless junk disruptive Terravore deck could be a thing. Grotog feels, I don't know.
Grotog might have a renaissance with red going.
Well, that's true. It does help to have less red for Grotog, but the problem with Grotog right now is that the good creatures are not concentrated in. So Grotog was good when Meddling Mage, Quirion Dryad, and Psychotog could solve all your problems, right? Meddling Mage basically was rarely outclassed. Quirion Dryad is never outclassed, and that's still the case. Like, Quirion Dryad is still like 4 of awesome, and then Psychotog is excellent, right? Like, Psychotog is actually really good against Grotog's Kryptonite, which is Call the Herd. But now you're kind of like, well, I kind of want a little Nimble Mongoose. I kind of want a little Call the Herd, but Call the Herd's bad against Powder Keg.
You currently have AK?
I wouldn't cut AK right now from Grotog, but anything's possible.
Intuition or no?
I could play Intuition.
I feel like Intuition's just good if you're going to play AK and Nimble Mongoose, at which point you should just have a Wonder in your 75.
I mean,
if you have a Wonder in your 75, all these things change.
Yeah, but then you kind of want to have like some other way to put Wonder in your graveyard besides Psychotog. Like, lest we forget. AK. Well, yeah, AK. I mean, so you go AK hand size your Wonder. Yeah. This is not going to work. Like, most of the time, you're gonna like cast your Wonder and pray. Like, you would have to play another outlet. Not that I'm against. Merfolk Looter, Waterfront Bouncer, like, let's go.
1/1s for 2 are just not where it's
at. Well, if there's no more Mog Fanatics, there's no more Mog Fanatics.
Lanny, you spent the entire first half of this podcast decrying a 1/1 utility creature for half as much mana that draws a card. Now you're like, I want to play ones that cost twice as much mana that generate 50% of a card worth of value. Okay, so I also want to keep building Iggy Pop. I think Iggy Pop is sweet, and there's a lot that you can kind of discover about the deck. And finally, Oath of Druids, one of the most broken cards in pre-modern.
completely fallen off. I think there has to be an Oath of Druids deck. There just has to be. Like, I know that people are trying. They're just like, there's no world in which Oath of Druids is not one of the pillars that pre-modern is resting on. I just like, there's just no way. But we'll find out next week on Spy Colony. Love Spy.
Game over.